Right, corresponding squares 3. Strongly recommend you go for corresponding squares 1 and 2 first of all. Otherwise, what we're about to do is going to come across as completely mental. You won't have a clue what's going on. Even if you have watched corresponding squares 1 and 2, the position we're about to look at that you can see on the screen and the way corresponding squares is used in it is still pretty mental, and I'm not sure I've got a clue what's going on. I've decided to. I had a few more corresponding squares things to do, but I've decided not to go through them because I just think they're a bit too mental, and I think this is going to be good enough as a video by itself. Just going through this one position from this game between Gulko and Short from 1995. It's white to play. Pause the video and have a go at seeing if you can work out what on earth's going on, and is there any way to establish any corresponding squares at all to begin with, and then how you're going to use that to sort of establish a further pattern of correspondence, and yeah, see if you can draw the game as Gulko did. So the first thing to check is what happens if white just sort of makes a run for liquidating this e-pawn with this f-pawn, trying to get into a king and rook's pawn versus a king clearly drawn situation. So the first thing to look at maybe is king f4. Black plays king e7. There's a reason black plays king e7, which will become clear later on, rather than king f7. King f5, and then black plays king f7. Now, if white just sort of carries on with the plan of liquidation, e4, then black can push the h-pawn, and black's won. Okay, we're going to take the e-pawn at the next go, and we're on one of the 3 key squares, so that's 1 for black. If we get to this stage and white realises that they've lost if they push the e-pawn, they might try king f4 instead. They're still in trouble. King e6, king e4, and black pushes the h-pawn, and you can see that that's 1. So it's not going to work for white to just push the, try and liquidate the pawn straight away. Even in this position after white's e4, I mean obviously black to move because white's just played e4. Even if it was white to move, it's still lost because if you try and liquidate, black just pushes the h-pawn, and you have to deal with that. The king comes to g4, and then we're going to take, and this king is going to get around to d4. You'll have to meet king d4 probably with king e2, but then black's won. I mean, maybe we should just play that through actually just to see. So, we can't play it through. I'm going to have to just do some silly moves just to get back to this position with white to move. So let's do some silly moves. Let's see that. So we're going to go white to move e5, h4, king g4 is pretty much. Well, you've got e6 check actually as well. That's interesting. But king g4, we're going to take there, and you can see that it's lost. Okay, so that's worth noting as well, that even in this position where it's black to move, if it was white to move, it's gone. So it doesn't really work to go and try and liquidate that pawn straight away. But then Gulko worked out that if he can meet king e6 with king h4, he's going to be all right. I mean, what does white do against black? Just sort of marching their king up the board. Well, if you can meet king e6 with king h4, that's going to be okay, as long as your white pawn's back on e3. Because we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's a draw. Okay, so king e6 can be met with king h4. If the black king goes the other way and comes to g6, then that can be met with king f4. And that's kind of a hold up as well. Like f5 will be met with e4. And that's going to be a, oh my god, that's going to be a draw. and pushing the H pawn. You just play king g4 and win it. That's clearly a draw because we can come back to f2 and defend the e pawn. So that's clearly a draw on it. And then all black's only other choice really is just go back again. So f4 corresponds with g6 and h4 corresponds with e6. Very well done if you even worked that out to begin with. I certainly didn't. But that straight away means that g3 corresponds with f7. Because if the black king's on f7, the white king needs to be ready to jump to green or red. And if the white king was on h3, or sorry, if the black king was on e7, the black king's ready to jump to blue or green. So the white king also needs to be ready to jump to blue or green. Similarly, and I'm running out of colours now, if the black king is on g7, the white king needs to be ready to jump to red or blue. So it also needs to be on f3. So f3 and g7 correspond. I don't really know what colour to do those in, to be honest. I wish there was a way I could do a fifth colour. I don't think there is. I've tried to look it up, but I don't think there is. Yeah, the f3 and g7 squares, which correspond, are a different set of corresponding squares to the h4 and e6, I guess. I'm just asking that you remember that, I suppose. So if you look at the position at the moment, the black king is ready to jump to e7, f7 or g7, yellow, blue or green. So the white king needs to be ready to jump to yellow, blue or green. And the g4 square is covered by black's pawn. So the astonishing first move is king g2. And Gulko worked all of this out and played king g2. I mean, I'll keep the colours on the board and just sort of go through the moves that happened in the game. Just so you can see how they're jumping around. Because Gulko's worked it all out. But pretty damn sure Nigel Short's worked it all out as well. Because he doesn't step on the blue, the yellow or the green. He tries to trick his opponent. He goes king g8, which I suppose is a distant opposition, actually, isn't it? Maybe he's just thinking along. Actually, is it a distant opposition? Looks like it's distant. Yes, it is a distant opposition, isn't it? Anyway, he goes king g8, and then he's then ready to jump to green or blue. So Gulko played king f2, also still ready to jump to green or blue. Nigel Short went back to f8. Gulko went back to g2. So I'll just take those arrows off. Just going back to where they started. Then he tried king e7. He jumped onto the yellow. So white jumped onto the yellow. White jumped onto the yellow. Short tried this onto the blue. Gulko played king g3. Then he came here onto the red, onto g6, and we established right at the start that f4 corresponds with g6. If instead he'd gone king e6, we go to h4. h4 corresponds with e6. So the game actually finished. I'll show you in a sec, but the game actually finished. I think Short came here, Gulko played this, and then he just sort of, I think, gave up a little bit and went to h6. There was also the thing of what happens if black pushes the pawn, which we need to look at. So if you remember the king f4, I'll just get all these arrows off the board. Right at the start, I said if white makes a dash for the pawn and plays king f4, black's winning move actually is king e7, because just by a bit of coincidence, white's ready to jump. If the white king's on f4, the drawing moves would be back to f3 or g3. If black was to step on green or blue, white can step on green or blue. So that's why at the beginning king e7 was the move to play against king f4, not king f7. So yeah, you know, they danced around. I mean, the colours are about to go now, so you're just going to have to trust those arrows I drew, and they were corresponding squares with the colours. But it ended up with I short chose the root of the F4 and the F4 and G6 corresponding squares. So it went like this: King G2, King G8, bit of messing about. E3, E7 and H3 correspond. F7 corresponded to G3. G6 corresponded to F4. So this was the point where if King E6 had happened, H4 corresponds to E6. This had to be checked, I suppose. This is one of the things about corresponding squares, is that if the pawn structure is not completely static, just one pawn move and all the squares that correspond might have changed. But this isn't that hard to calculate, this one. You just see that E4 is a draw. You can see that's a draw. So yeah, King G6, F4 corresponds, and then Short went to H6. He tried that one, and then White comes into F5, and then he tried this King H7 move, which was a bit sneaky, because what he's trying to do there is entice White to either play King takes F6 or King F4. We know would lose to King G6 because F4 and G6 correspond. But White pushed the E-pawn. Short came back to H6. He took on F6 and they agreed to draw. How about that? Absolutely brilliant in my view. No wonder these guys are grandmasters and we're not. I guess that's at the sort of the super GM level from the 1990s. I mean, I understand corresponding squares, and I feel like I could use them in a sort of simple triangulation situation. And once all those colours are on the board, I can follow a rule to match a colour with a colour. We can all do that. But it was the starting bit of establishing that H4 and E6 corresponded, and F4 and G6 corresponded. And if you're playing a position, would you have looked at the position and thought, this is a position where corresponding squares is going to help me solve it? Don't know. Anyway, I thought that was really good, and I hope you liked it.